So, Ahmed, in 10 words or less, what are some of the most striking things that you've seen in Baghdad?
There are different visions, troubled US-Iraq relations, and resiliency of the Iraqi people.
Welcome to this week's Iraq Briefing, where we discuss the top stories shaping Iraq today. I'm Omar Nidawi with Enabling Peace in Iraq Center, or EPIC, and I'm once again joined by my dear friend and our senior fellow here at EPIC, Ahmed Ali. Ahmed has just returned from spending several months in Iraq, including in Baghdad, doing research on an upcoming big study for EPIC. So, welcome back, Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Omar. It's really wonderful to be back, and I am excited to catch up with you and our viewers.
It's great to have you back. How many months, how much time did you spend in Baghdad?
So I was in Iraq for a good 3 months, and it was wonderful to travel to different parts of the country, be it Baghdad, Erbil, Sulaymaniyah, and do some research for a study that we will talk about in a minute.
Let me ask you this. How did Iraq look to you this time? Was it different from the last time you were there? A lot has changed regionally. A lot of change has changed within the country itself. What kind of changes did you perceive there? Was it safe? Did you feel safe traveling around the country?
I think Iraq is more tense now than it was in 2025 when I visited because we try to go every year into the country and interview people and just see how the political direction of the country is going. This time it was more tense, that's for sure, and it had to do mostly with the war, the 40-day war or the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States. Iraq is in the middle of it. You can drive around the country and you will see areas or buildings that were hit during the war, and it's all there. And as a result, the people do feel a bit under pressure and just unsure, uncertain about the future of the country. And this is I would say, across the board. It's not just the political class, it's not just the average Iraqis. At the same time, there is a lot of resilience among the Iraqis, and life still goes on, and things are not necessarily closed down, or offices are open, shops are always open. So life goes on in all parts of the country. But the country has definitely taken a hit from this war, and the fact that it is a major front for the war is not forgotten on the Iraqis. It's definitely felt by a lot of Iraqis. And I would say politically, I was there when Prime Minister Ali Zaidi assumed office, and that pushed a lot of new energy into the political scene because, as you and Eric have been discussing, he's not a known political quantity. He's known to the political class, we have to admit that, but he is not known as a political leader. And up until he got the office in May of this year, and then when the anti-corruption campaign started, which you and Eric also discussed, I think it shook the political scene in a bit, and it introduced more uncertainty into the political process in Iraq.
Yeah. I want to go back and like ask you about the security feel for Iraq, and you said it was tense, and I think when you mention tension, the first thing that comes to mind is checkpoints. Did you see more of them or fewer of them this time compared to last time?
It was about the same in
Okay.
terms of the number of checkpoints and just I would say, the attitude at the checkpoints themselves. Iraq is pretty resilient at this point and is used to dealing with different security situations and tension points when something like this happens. And I would say it wasn't, it didn't feel a whole lot different compared to 2025.
That's good.
I,
Or
Now,
good or worse, I don't know.
on the other side, and on the other hand, Omar, you do feel, especially in Baghdad, the development in the city is still pretty striking in terms of infrastructure, in terms of places that are open and continue to be open. Yes, there is a bit of a lull in government activities, as I'm sure our viewers remember, during the tenure of Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, there was a lot of initiatives to build these bridges and road initiatives or road improvement initiatives that a lot of Iraqis were mocking, or some of them were praising, depending on their political camp. That has slowed down a little bit just because of the new government and the approach it wants to take. But you do have a lot of development in the city, and Baghdad continues to be a pretty lively city, I would say, from
Mm.
all perspectives. Aside from the tensions that happen and just a bit of the uncertainty when there are, airstrikes in Baghdad or around Baghdad. Otherwise, life is pretty normal in Baghdad.
Were you did you happen to be around any of the airstrikes or drone strikes
For
in any of the cities you've been to?
Fortunately, not immediately, but when you're in the country and just during the time I was there, you would hear about them, and you would understand that this place got hit. It could be, it's all close to each other. Iraq is a big country, but things are pretty compact too. So may I didn't
Within the
witness,
cities.
well, within
Yeah.
the cities in particular. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about there were areas hit in Baghdad that are in pretty well congested and busy neighborhoods and upscale neighborhoods because of this war. So people do feel it, people do talk about it, but I wouldn't say it has restricted the movement of people.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, to be in a place where to try to build something in a place where you know that next month could be another crisis, next week could be another airstrike. It takes a level of a leap of faith, so to speak,
It
to
does.
make that decision and invest in the unknown.
It does. I
So
think I think the biggest
kudos to
I think the biggest
yeah.
the biggest thing that people were very much worried about was actually the air traffic movement and uh, whether the airport is open or not. I think a lot of Iraqis and a lot of international folks, they they were just watching closely what would happen with the airports, because the movement continued. The Iraqis, I would say, still wanted to travel, still wanted to enjoy some vacation time, or they had business outside of all kinds of natures. And in addition to the international investors, I think that was really on everybody's mind, is what would happen with the
Yeah.
airports and how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and also has I think a humanitarian aspect to it because a lot of Iraqis do travel for medical treatment abroad because of the questionable quality of medical care in Iraq. And I think a lot of Iraqis go to Turkey, to India, to other countries, to Jordan for medical treatment. And I think that unfortunately can be disruptive to people who need that care.
It was very disruptive, and you could
Yeah.
feel it, that's for sure. Yes.
So I want to pivot to the work that you are doing in Iraq. You are doing some interesting research on some interesting geopolitical questions about Iraq's foreign policy and the foreign policy of other big countries towards Iraq. So, tell us a little bit more about that and why it's important, and maybe some of your early impressions or findings from that work.
The research we're doing is very exciting, and it's very unique in its approach. We're looking at how Iraqis view future U.S.-Iraqi relations, how Iraqi views look at the role of China, Russia, and also Iran in the country, and in particular after October 7 and now after the February war that is still ongoing. And I have to be thankful to the many people who we were able to interview during this trip. And early impressions from it is that there are different visions about the direction of the country. Um, uh, you have different camps, and we do have to understand and present the views of those camps, because they are deciding the future of the country. So you have the camps that do want very good relations with the United States, and they're pushing for good relations with the United States. And then you have camps that still want a big Russian, Iranian, and Chinese role in the country. And then you have within Iraq itself, you have a camp, for example, that wants to redefine relations between Erbil and Baghdad based on what has been happening since October 7. and then you also have a camp which is mostly the civil society camp that still sees democracy as a viable option for Iraq and something that the United States and other countries can help improve in the country because they see it as a tool for accountability and part of the geopolitical position of Iraq. And overall, the research is very important because there is a moment inside Iraq and less so in Washington that is redefining the relationship between Iraq and the United States after 23 years of continuous involvement of Washington in Iraq and the 23 years of involvement of Iran in Iraq as well. Fewer years for Russia and China, but there is a moment and an opportunity to redefine and establish a guideline for the relationship for the next 4 years at least.
Interesting work, Ahmed. And I know that you are hoping to publish your findings in a report in sometime around December. But in the meantime, I want to tell our readers or our audience that we will be dedicating 2 episodes of the Iraq briefing to actually discussing more of the findings of your research in depth. So people who are interested in this among our audience, please stay tuned. We will come to you with more juicy episodes and details about what about the state of Iraq's foreign relations with China, Russia, Iran, the US, and how all of these interests and agendas interact in the country. So stay tuned for that. Um, Ahmed, I want to turn to go back to actually what you mentioned about Zaidi, that he's being a known quantity for the political class, um, but not a known quality for a lot of the people in the Iraqi public, and certainly for a lot of Iraq watchers outside. And it was interesting the other day. I was looking at reports about protests in Baghdad by college graduates. They're demanding jobs, and it was interesting to see them using chants in support, voicing support for Zaidi so early in his tenure. And I don't think other Iraqi prime ministers have seen expressions of support from the public, especially the public that is, a segment of the public that's voicing at the same time discontent with current situation. So I know like things are not always what they appear to be, and people pay to get things done on the streets. But based on what you have seen yourself, the conversations that you've had with the Iraqis, both on the political, within the political elite, and ordinary Iraqis, how how do Iraqis feel about Zaidi? Well, how do they view him? Do they see him as a continuation of the system, or as someone who's trying to, or has the potential to change the system, or just what exactly? How do they interpret him?
The first thing Iraqis are always wondering about, and they shared with me almost immediately, and in a way of a question, is why does Washington support Zaidi? I think there was a lot of interest in how Zaidi got his position and the support he has right now from Washington, and they saw that during the visit. I was in Iraq during the visit when Prime Minister Zaidi came to Washington, and there was a lot of just mystery around why Washington supports Zaidi and all that.
It is a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
That it's a big question for the Iraqis, and but at the same time, I think that perception that Washington does support Zaidi is enabling Zaidi to be more powerful when he takes decisions and when he approaches sensitive issues and critical issues such as the disarming of the pro-Iran militias or some factions of the Hashd Shabi. I think that Washington support is seen as very significant to him. And people around Zaidi that we were able to meet with, they do think it is critical that support can continues. And at the same time, what you have with Zaidi is that he has been on the job for 3 months, and there is a sense among all actors that I met with and interviewed of okay, what can we do to further our agenda with this new prime minister? So whether it's the Iraqi Shia factions or Iraqi Sunni factions, Iraqi Kurdish factions, and even civil society actors who are independent by and large. So the level of support that you talked about, it may be very effective in terms of public imaging for Zaidi, but on the ground you're feeling it as well. You're seeing some civil society actors who are independent, who are giving Zaidi the benefit of the doubt, and they think, at least in their approach right now, okay, let's see what we can do with him. And a big factor has to do with the fact that Zaidi is a young guy. You know, he's only 40 years old. He doesn't seem to have a sectarian bent to his politics. He's very business oriented, results oriented. He just wants to look at Iraq from a different perspective, and that's appreciated on the ground. So that's how people see it. But then I think his anti-corruption campaign also created some momentum for him on the street and with the Iraqi public. I was there when it was happening. I was actually in Baghdad as it was unfolding, and I think every politician was concerned that they were going to get picked up by the counterterrorism service, which is Iraq's elite force, and the force that Zaidi is coming to rely on with his military decisions and military operations. So that stirred some hope in the population. That's for sure. But at the same time, you still have the skepticism that Zaidi was brought to his position by the coordination framework, the CF, and that the fact that the coordination framework is mostly the political class of Iraq, and they have been accused, and some of them are admitting that there was a lot of corruption over the last 23 years. It doesn't sit well with the public. So the public is giving Zaidi some hope. The political class is giving Zaidi the benefit of the doubt, but there is a realization that he has limits in what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always nuance to any political actor, especially any prime minister in Iraq, just because they were, the product of a compromise within the coordination framework or the political elites does not mean that they are entirely beholden to that political establishment. Other prime ministers who have come as compromise have sometimes done things that antagonized their political backers, Haider Abadi or Mustafa al-Kalimi, even Adil Abdel Mahdi for a little bit. Just because they are a product of the system doesn't mean that they're going to do everything the system by the way that the system wants it. But it also, yes, of course, puts I think, huge restraints on their level of independence for action. So I guess we'll see. I mean, the question is has Zaidi going to fall victim to the problem of over-promising and then failing to deliver? That's what we're going to see in the next, few weeks on both the corruption fight and the disarmament fight. Uh, Good luck
That's
to him and to all of Iraq.
I I think that's a big question, Omar, and at
Yeah.
least what we can see right now is that Zaidi doesn't necessarily have the plan B for when he takes a decision and when he takes action, and there is a strong reaction to it. And even in our research, in my research, when I met with different actors, from previous prime minister offices and Iraqi governments, what they did talk about is, okay, if you take a big action, whether it's about corruption or whether it's about disarming the pro-Iran militias, is okay, they are going to have a reaction. What is your plan B? You have to have a plan B. At
Yeah,
least over the
yeah,
last
yeah.
3 weeks, three weeks in particular, with the different security events that have taken place, and we have we have covered in Ishim, it doesn't seem that Zaidi has a good plan B, or at least
Right.
an action to take right away if the pro-Iran militias, for example, push back and do something in the streets of Baghdad. So he is still on a learning curve, that's for sure. He is, I think, respected for his ability to build interpersonal relations and build a good rapport with stakeholders, and I think Iraqi saw that in the way he handled, President Trump and his Oval Office visit. But he really is still confronting a big bureaucracy and a structure that is pretty well entrenched and well established, that is not easy to push back against.
Yeah, I think there is a general tendency among Iraqi politicians, decision makers, to not think too far ahead. Take things one step at a time, and you know, in conversations that I've had here in DC with other rock watchers, often the notion or the memory of the Charge of the Knights, Solat al-Fursan of Nur al-Maliki from 2008 comes into the conversation because it doesn't matter if you plan or not. What matters is like you actually jump in and see what shakes out. And some people think like maybe he's that's the model he's going to follow. Whether that works or not, of course, is unknown. But I think it's not good advice. I think to act before planning and before thinking uh, throughout the possible, consequences and ramifications of anything that you do, especially when it comes to really delicate and potentially explosive matters as disarming militias or fighting corruption networks that are so deeply entrenched in the political
I would
system.
say, Omar, though, if
Uh,
you allow me,
yeah,
is that the
of
anti-corruption
course.
campaign has introduced a different dynamic within the Iraqi public because for the first time in 23 years, you are seeing a campaign that discusses and reveals exact amounts of money that officials have embezzled or have stolen or have repurposed from the state budget. So when the Iraqi public is seeing the seizure of $23 million in some politician's house or some official's house. And there are photos of it, there are videos of it spread on social media. That is making the Iraqi public definitely less patient with the politicians and a bit more supportive of Zaidi because Zaidi is able to say, this wasn't on my watch, so I'm just revealing it. So I think that that way of doing business in confronting corruption is providing Zaidi with some support, but it's also creating more discontent and disenchantment of Iraqis with the political process because an average Iraqi right now is looking at the seizure of $23 million in Adnan Jumaili's house, who I'm sure our viewers know who he is, in some village in Salah ad-Din. They're saying, okay, what about the bigger officials? How much do they have in their houses?
Exactly, exactly.
So it's introducing a
Yeah.
lot of more tension and more lack of legitimacy for the political process as a whole.
And eventually more pressure on Zaidi to actually take action against bigger fish.
That's exactly right. Yes.
And that's going to get risky. Um, Staying kind of like on the theme of corruption and money, there has been a lot of debate and discussion and exploration of the economic impact of the Iran war on Iraq. The country's oil exports have been decimated, and revenue is shrinking, deficit is rising, and you've probably seen that. Eric and I have kind of covered this, dynamic, this issue in multiple videos and publications in recent months. But I wanted to get from you a little bit about the feel on the ground. Like, how is that impacting daily life during the time that you were in Baghdad or in Sulaimania, for that matter? I think where the economic let's say, moat is even narrower. Um, was the situation really as dire as it appears from here? Were you seeing any manifestations of the economic impact of the war?
I think this issue has to be the biggest priority for Zaidi because the public is feeling it right away. For the first time in 23 years, the Iraqi government is unable to meet its obligation to provide salaries for public sector employees, for government employees. Now it has become very much the norm that the salary gets delayed for 40 to 45 days. And the Iraqi public is not used to that. The Iraqi government is still the biggest employer in the country. And Zaidi doesn't seem to have the solutions to it. And it is a direct impact from the war because Iraq is unable to export its oil as it used to in 7 months ago in January of this year. So I think Zaidi has to focus on this issue, but I think you and Eric have discussed it. And if I may plug in your new study as well, it is not an easy problem to solve in terms of trying to find alternative routes for Iraqi oil at this point. So what it is creating, and I saw that on the ground as well with the political class as well, is that there is a more of an urgent push to diversify Iraq's economy, to diversify Iraq's access to the market, to the export market. But that also creates a lot of pressure on Zaidi, who is bragging that he's a businessman. He knows how to take business-oriented solutions to any problem. But this one is definitely much bigger than managing a holding company in Baghdad. So how he can solve it, I think he will be under a lot of pressure for it.
Indeed, indeed. And I just want to share a little anecdote that I noticed the other day. There was a government official who was bragging about or celebrating the fact that the share of non-oil revenue out of state revenue for the month of, I think it was June or June, was up to 20% of total revenue. And it's not because that amount grew, but because the amount of oil revenue shrunk so much that non-oil revenue was growing. So it was an example of it was a funny example of spinning something catastrophic to make it look like it's something positive. But it is good that people see more clearly the urgency of diversifying Iraq's, streams of revenue, not just in terms of exporting oil through different outlets, but also reducing the dependency on oil altogether, because this is not a way to run a successful economy in the 21st century, where the energy landscape is changing every day around us.
Absolutely. And I
Ahmed,
think it's also,
yeah,
Omar, it's making a big question. It's creating a big question about the geopolitical position of Iraq. And this is something that we will get into when we have a deeper discussion on the interviews we conducted. But it's creating the geopolitical question about should Iraq continue its foreign relations in the way it has for the last 23 years. Maybe it's time for Iraq to be able to go to Jordan, create closer relations with Turkey, closer relations with Syria. So the war in Iran and the impact on Iraq is creating this new dynamic for Iraq's future position.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Ahmed, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And it's really great to have you back in DC. I look forward to connecting with you in person soon. And to our audience, thanks for being with us. Thanks for tuning in. This is it for this briefing. If you have enjoyed this update, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with friends who might be interested in staying up to date on events in Iraq and the surrounding region. You can get our weekly updates on Iraq and other reports and analyses, including Ahmed's upcoming research report will be coming out in December, by visiting us at enablingpeace.org. Until next time, مع السلامة.